Good morning. Am I too loud? I seem to be picking up an echo. Maybe I should be a little softer. That's good. Okay, here we go again. So today I'd like to go over some results on visual perception, including getting us into issues concerning laminar cortical dynamics of adaptive behavior. And here, if one thinks about the larger goal is to develop a modal architecture of vision, in particular a biological general purpose, real-time, autonomous, my favorite words, vision recognition planning and tracking system. Well, I can't possibly tell you everything you know about that today, but the kind of architecture we'll be leading to has multiple processing stages, processing streams, and is connected with bottom-up, top-down, and horizontal connections. So there's a lot to understand here. And to put it into perspective, there are already emerging models from the earliest phases of processing right up into prefrontal cortex in both the what and the streams. So it's just impossible to even briefly survey everything that is going on now. And to make the task even larger, a lot of this work is transferred to technology and large-scale autonomous intelligent image processing systems. I can only mention a drop about that, but I just want to emphasize that these concepts have been really useful, and they've gone into quite a few large-scale applications, notably with my team in the laboratory over the years. So why don't we jump into a really wonderful issue, at least I personally love it, the issue of seeing versus knowing, where we think of seeing an object versus knowing what it is. It has a glorious history in visual science. I like talking about it as seeing versus recognizing. So here you just have some blue lines, you get an emerging circle, it's brighter inside. So this Ehrenstein disk we can both see and recognize. On the other hand, if you look at the offset grading here, you can recognize the vertical illusory contour, but you don't really see it. It's not brighter or darker here. You're just consciously aware of it. So you recognize it, but you don't really see it in the sense of it having different conscious quality on two sides of the boundary. So we immediately can acknowledge that we can recognize objects that we cannot see. This often goes by the name of amodal perception. Well, a lot of people might have thought, well, we see things to recognize them, but that's a counterexample, so it turns things topsy-turvy, and we really have to ask all over again, why do we bother to see, and what is the difference between seeing and knowing or recognizing? Well, as in so many themes in vision, it goes way back, several great people. Helmholtz believed that seeing and knowing are closely related. He had his famous doctrine of unconscious inference, whereby, roughly speaking, he claimed we see what we expect to see based on past learning. And this aspect of it we touched on a little yesterday in terms of expectation and in particular how they're realized by art. Knitze, on the other hand, in the 20th century, believed that seeing and knowing function according to different rules, and it's been an enduring controversy. And I think it behooves us to at least pause to ask, why is this question so hard to answer? Well, I would say that one reason is that, well, they're different in the sense that seeing and knowing operate at different levels of the brain and use specialized circuits, where knowing is more in infratemporal and prefrontal cortex, as a number of talks have already indicated, and seeing is lower down in striate and pre-striate visual cortices. But what makes it so hard is that they interact via feedback, and they use similar cortical designs, and the claim is that feedback is also needed for conscious seeing. So they're really intimately linked and they share a lot, but they are different. Okay, so I already spoke about the offset rating, which shows that some boundaries are invisible, but here's an image due to Knizia, which illustrates what I mean when I say that all boundaries are invisible. In order to detect the boundary of this gray surface, you have to put together boundaries that are black-gray, white-gray, black-gray, white-gray. They have opposite contrast polarity, and so you have to pool the dark light and the light-dark contrasts in order to build a boundary around the whole thing. Well, if you pool over dark light and light dark, that would mean that you can't use that boundary as a signal for seeing. And that's what I mean when we say that all boundaries are invisible. And perhaps the simplest example of those invisible boundaries is the famous reverse contrast Knizia square. Here you have a black-gray and a white-gray, dark light, light dark. They are forming a boundary inwardly between them. So in the boundary system, they're pooling over opposite contrast polarity. Here you have the same contrast polarity. Here you have opposite. They all work together to give you the emergent square. So boundaries are invisible, but on the other hand, we see this image. So that means that something other than boundaries are going on. There's another system that gives us surface brightness and other surface quality. So you might immediately ask, why do we need that other system? And I believe one way to motivate it in terms of the property of discounting the illuminant, which is the property that when we're going through the world, we're always seeing things in variable illumination conditions, and if we didn't compensate for that at a very early stage, we would be confusing illumination conditions with form, which would seem to undulate as we got different shadows on us. Well, if that happened, we could never get enough invariant input to recognize anything. So discounting the illuminant happens at a very early stage, and Land, who founded the Polaroid company, has popularized some of the issues here by taking different colored lights, shining them with gradients across an image, and doing it in a really clever way. So, for example, you might have two locations in an image where Land has constructed it so that the amount of light in different wavelengths, the energy of light in different wavelengths of individual spectrum, is approximately the same coming to the eye. On the other hand, you might see this as a blue and this as an orange or red. And so that raises the dilemma, how is it possible for them to have the same local spectrum, but on the other hand, have quite different appearance? And so the intuitive idea is that in order to discount the illuminant, what you're doing is you're suppressing signals in the middle of homogeneous patches of color. And all you're picking up are signals where you have rapid changes in the reflectances that are reflected through the illuminant energy to the eye. So let's in particular look at this boundary here, and let's say there's a gradient of colored light going across that boundary. On one side you have one reflectance or relative amount of light in that wavelength reflected. On the other side you have another reflectance. Well, to the left of this intensity, let's say it's I, you have a little more, you have I plus epsilon, and what's reflected is the reflectance times the illuminant energy, so it's that product. On the other side, you have a little less than I, let's say I minus epsilon, and what's reflected to your eye is the reflectance times that illuminant energy. And so what Land and others observed, that if the brain computed the ratio of these, since epsilon is a lot smaller than I, the illuminant just cancels, and you can pick out a measure of relative reflectance where you don't really have much contamination by the illuminant. So that says that at an early stage of processing, we're computing color contours in order to discount the illuminant, but these aren't the boundary contours because, among other things, they're invisible. So that raises the issue, why don't we see just the color contours? And this raises the idea that you use these color contours now to fill in an estimate of what the surface color should be at a higher level of processing. So this is an example of that theme I mentioned in my first lecture of hierarchical resolution of uncertainty. And a key point is that boundaries are there to contain that filling in within the regions that they have to remain in. Well, there are other reasons for these sort of processes. And if you look at a cross-section of the eye, the light will come in here, and for example, let's say it hits the most sensitive, photosensitive fovea. But in addition, there's this big blind area where the optic nerve is formed to take the neural signals up to the brain for further processing. So if you look down on the retina, here's the fovea, but then you have this big blind spot here, and you also have all of these veins covering photosensitive tissue. So the fovea is really, the retina is really quite a noisy organ, and the question is, why aren't we always getting confused by these blind or occluded areas? So if you think about that schematically, let's say all you were trying to do was to register an edge which happened to go through a vein in a blind spot. Why aren't we always facing the problem of these kind of obstructions? Well, the first point is that our eyes are jiggling very quickly in their orbits. And these pieces of the brain that are part of the retina are stabilized with respect to that jiggle. And we're designed so that stabilized images fade, so that at least we don't have to worry about the vein and blind spot per se, but what's left is an incomplete and occluded thing. You'd never know it was an edge. And so one of the claims is that what the brain is doing is building these boundaries. So you're building boundaries inwardly here, and then you're trying to fill in the surface color so that you don't know that there was a blind spot in the vein there. But then you immediately recognize, oh my God, these regions here are illusions, and this stuff is sort of real. What's the difference between reality and illusion? And I would want to argue that a visual illusion is just an unexpected combination of these emergent boundaries and featural filling in or surface filling in. And if it isn't unexpected, we think it's real, but it's just as illusory in terms of the fact that it's a reconstruction. Okay. So, a good example of this was developed in the 60s by Grossberg and Jarvis, where they did sort of heroic stabilized image experiments. So they, with a suction cup technique, now you can use electronic feedback, would attach part of an image to the retina so that as the retina wiggled, the image would be stabilized. And if you stabilize this part of the image, then sure enough, these boundaries will fade. These boundaries here won't fade. And so what happens is that the red spills in across the black and white regions, fills in up to these boundaries. And so what you tend to see is that you see this red is lighter because of the contrast. You see this red is darker because of the contrast, but you don't see the black and white. All you see is 3 shades of red. So a key issue is that when the boundaries fade, the colors will flow. And that shows, among other things, you can't just use bottom filtering to understand vision. It also shows that one of the reasons for boundaries is to restrict this flow. And it emphasizes that the boundary and feature or surface system aren't the same. And so Enya Mingola and I, in the 80s, were really attracted to these ideas. And so we introduced what we call the boundary contour system, because you're picking out these boundary contours, which builds these boundary segmentations from all kinds of information. But these boundaries are invisible or amodal, but they're there to restrict the filling in that goes on in what we call the feature contour system, which is a surface system. At the time, we like calling it feature contours because these are the visible features that we think we see. And here's the system that discounts the illuminant, and it fills in these surface representations, and that's what we see. Well, you might say, what are the rules of boundaries and surfaces? And if you were here at my first talk, I indicated that the boundary and surface computations are complementary. You don't just have independent modules in the brain. And by complementarity, what I mean is the following. If you look at this nice neon color spreading example, the boundaries form, like the square boundary forms in an oriented fashion, inwardly between pairs or greater numbers of inducers. And as I indicated with reverse contrast Knizia square, those boundaries are insensitive to direction of contrast or contrast polarity. They pool over opposite contrast polarity so that we can recognize boundaries of objects in front of textured backgrounds. On the other hand, the surface system has an unoriented spread of color for reasons that I won't go into today. The boundaries here get broken, the color flows out. So the color flows in an unoriented outward fashion to fill the boundaries that are there, and it is sensitive to direction of contrast in the obvious sense that we actually see it. And so you can see the manifest complementarity of oriented, unoriented, inward, outward, insensitive, sensitive, which I would claim is due to a kind of symmetry breaking that goes on during the morphogenesis or development of the visual cortex. So if you ask where are the boundaries and surfaces, I would claim, and more evidence supports our prediction, that if you look at the streams that are relevant, you go from the lateral geniculate nucleus, so you have the retina, the LGN, and you go into the interblob stream from D1 to D4, that's where the boundaries are, I would claim. And if you go into the parallel lob stream, that's where the surfaces are. Now, some of you may be aware that Livingstone and Hubel, for example, said that this stream is for color, this is for orientation. But I want to strongly emphasize that surfaces and boundaries are not equivalent to that, because among other things, you can have illusory contours where there are no local orientations. You can have invisible amodal boundaries. You can also have amodal filling in a surface color, so you're not seeing anything, so how can you talk about color? Okay, well, we'll be talking quite a bit about B1, that first stage of cortex, and this just gives you a schematic to see that it's near the back of the brain, so, and here's the LGN. Well, let me jump right away into this crucial issue of perceptual grouping or boundary formation. And it shows itself in many different forms, whether it's formation of illusory contours as in Knizia square, or the pop out of the salient grouping in a texture, or the separation of a figure from the background. One of the main properties that comes up here is how that grouping takes place. And Ennio and I, in the early to mid-'80s, predicted that this is due to a certain particular kind of cells, which are called bipole cells. So these are cells which, when let's say they respond to just one part of Knizia square, would try to send horizontal connections outward to start building a boundary. But you don't want a boundary to form just from this, because then boundaries would just shoot out everywhere. And so the intuitive idea here is that they try to excite their neighbors, but they also activate inhibitory interneurons so that the excitation and inhibition is approximately balanced. So it's again one of these situations of one against one. On the other hand, if you do have the whole square, then you'll have bipole cells that are trying to activate from one side, trying to activate from the other side. The intuitive idea here is that they're adding up their signals, but they're also sharing a population of inhibitory neurons. And remember, I had shown you in the first day that if you have a population of self-inhibiting inhibitory neurons, they will normalize their activity. So this is a kind of 2 against 1. So you can form boundaries inwardly, but not outwardly. So that if you think about what's going on in real time, you would imagine you have the following kind of situation, that early on, you're going to have oriented cells that get activated. They start trying to spread their activation in particular directions. But outside, you have 1 against 1, and you get pulled in. Inside, you're supported by 2 against 1, and you can form a good boundary. Well, the question then arises is how do you activate those boundary cells? And now I'm going to give you just a very light touch schematic of how the layers of cortex seem to be organized to do this, and it leads to some, to me, still very exciting properties of why the cerebral cortex has this kind of laminar architecture, which is something that I raised earlier in my tutorial. So let's say you're coming from lateral geniculate nucleus. It's known that there's a strong bottom-up and oriented input into V1 layer 4. Here you have to be careful. It depends if you're a cat or a monkey, whether the initial step is oriented. But you're going to strongly activate V1 layer 4, ultimately oriented contrast effect is called simple cells. Well, immediately there's subtlety, because that's not the only input into layer 4. There's this direct input into layer 4. But in addition, the lateral geniculate activates layer 6. And then layer 6 also activates layer 4, but it also activates an off-surround. So the net effect of LGN on layer 4 is an on-center off-surround net. So immediately you want to ask, well, why do you have these two pathways here? Why isn't that a total waste of wire? If you're building a chip, you're never going to double the number of pathways like that unless it's a crucial issue. And there is a crucial issue that I'll mention in a moment. Well, but first, why the off-surround is there is now easy for us to see. In my first lecture, I pointed out that if you have a feed-forward shining on-center off-surround net, you get contrast normalization. So you preserve your contrast sensitivity to reflectance. You also can normalize the input. And this has now been used by many people, including David Heeger and Rodney Douglas in the 90s. But we knew it for years, and it's been such an important tool. Well, let's get back to this issue of why do you have two pathways? Well, a key hypothesis is that this 6 to 4 pathway is really modulatory. That is to say that the excitation coming from 6 to 4 is approximately balanced by the inhibition. Okay? And you might say, well, why is this? Well, we'll come back to it during the talk. But the claim is that this modulatory property is needed to get stable development of the cortex. That if this pathway could fire strongly all by itself, the cortex couldn't self-organize or develop. Well, you can't see that unless you analyze it. Well, if this is modulatory, then you can't turn on the cortex through layer 6. So that means you really need a direct path from layer 4. So there's a deep issue here about the self-organization of cortex. Okay, well, given that we have a little bit of understanding now of how you activate layer 4 then goes to layer 2, 3, and there we have our bipole cells that are going to be trying to start grouping through their collinear and coaxial receptor fields. And now there's a lot of data about how that happens. So you can do a fast feed-forward pass to start doing your grouping. But let's say there's a, well, I want to emphasize something about that. If you're in an unambiguous scene, you can just shoot right up to here, do your grouping, shoot up to the next part of cortex, and just go right through cortex like a fast feed-forward system. Okay? And people like Simon Thorpe, for example, have shown that you can get fast activation, let's say, in the hippocampal cortex under certain circumstances. But what if you have a really complicated scene with lots of possible groupings and a lot of contention? What then happens? So the question is, how is the final grouping selected? And here, I'd like to suggest that feedback is really important. And these sort of lamina ideas were developed by myself with, again, Enyo and our then student Bill Ross. So the cortex needs to do something really, really ingenious. It has a positive feedback path from layer 2, 3 to layer 6. So let's say that I happen to be the strongest grouping well, I'm going to get the strongest positive modulatory feedback to support me. I'm also going to give the strongest inhibition to the other groupings. And so I'm going to chop their feet off, and they're going to collapse. In addition, because this is now a cooperative competitive shunting net, it's going to maintain its analog sensitivity. Remember, it solves in my saturation dilemma. So out of this, we're going to have groupings now that are bound together by this feedback. That gives a property that I like calling analog coherence. So you're going to have your binding problem without a loss of analog sensitivity. Finally, you're going to convert the cortex into cortical columns. Of course, you're going to bind cells together by these columnar feedback. So this simple design has really wonderful properties. It can enhance the strongest grouping through the 2-3-6 to 2-3 on center. It can inhibit weaker groupings through the 2-3-6 to 4 off surround. The cooperative competitive feedback achieves analog coherence. And I want to emphasize, this is really a new way of computing, which hasn't been hardly exploited, because as the reliability of binary computing, it's coherent, it's locked in. It's not just squishy little numbers, but it has the sensitivity of analog computing. So it's behaving like a feed-forward and feedback net. It's behaving in a way like a binary and analog net. I can hardly imagine the full implications of that. So talking about this feed-forward feedback thing, I really want to emphasize it's really a novel hybrid. Because if the data are unambiguous, you can immediately get big activity in layer 2-3, and then you get a fast feed-forward out and just shoot from 4 to 2-3 to 4 to 2-3. On the other hand, let's say you have ambiguous data. Well, there'll be lots and lots of possibilities here. They're going to be hitting all of this competition. But that competition is self-normalizing. So if you have a lot of competitors, your own local activity is going to be pulled down. Okay. Well, if you have small amplitude, that means your output is going to be delayed. It's going to take a long time to achieve your threshold. You're going to have small amplitude activation of subsequent cells. But that little bit of feedback is now enough to contrast enhance. Remember sigmoid signals from the first day. And so the winners quickly emerge. As they emerge, they get high amplitude. They shoot right up, and they catch up. Okay, so the thing slows down when it's not sure, speeds up when it's sure. It's really subtle. So you might think of this as a kind of real-time Bayesian decision-making. There are a lot of Bayesians. This works in the non-stationary domain. So degree of uncertainty co-varies with amplitude, which you can think of as a real-time probability, self-normalizing. And that is inversely proportional to decision time. So we need to have a balance between cooperation and competition, and you want to know, well, is it there? Well, lately there have been some really delightful studies strongly supporting it, like in Charlie Gilbert's lab. Here you have the excitatory flanks and the excitatory bipole structure, the inhibitory flanks shown in a tilt illusion experiment. And here you have direct physiological recording. So this supported one of our really main predictions. Now I should immediately emphasize that when I say collinear, I don't just mean everything has to be perfectly aligned because we're made out of meat here. We got a lot of slop in there. If everything had to be perfectly aligned, you'd have a probability of 0 whatever beginning the grouping. So there are other factors here, like proximity. The amount of connection strength falls off with distance. Alignment, it falls off with the angle with respect to the preferred grouping direction. Orientation, it falls off with how far you are from the preferred orientation. So there's this sort of subtle kind of distance, orientation, alignment kernel that anyone used to draw all the time. So in particular, you really have to, I had a really nice slide here that showed a lot of the other people now who have, goodness, what really happens? Well, I'm not going to sweat it. Everyone uses it now, is what the slide said. It took about 10 years for people to use it, but now everyone uses bipoles. And this is an example of a simulation with Alan Govan and me, showing how you can go around curves in a simulation of the Ehrenstein illusion. Okay, well, with that brief introduction now to grouping, we have to acknowledge that in addition to having groupings occurring in several parts of cortex, it's also the case that attention can occur even as low as V1, and you can even get top-down processing to LGN. Well, you might say, why do you have attention and grouping both going on there? Well, let's first just look at the data. There are certain shared properties of attention and grouping, so maybe it's not so surprising that they're both there. Both of them will enhance weak near threshold stimuli for both attention and grouping. There are quite a few experiments. Both will suppress competing stimuli and rival groupings, and there's data for that too. But there were also very basic, seemingly contradictory constraints on attention and grouping. So, for example, grouping can produce above threshold activity where there's no bottom-up input. Like here, that's what we mean by visual illusion. Your bottom-up contrast here is not there, all right? But certainly you don't want attention on its own to produce above threshold activity in a location like here. If I say, look there, what do you see? That doesn't mean you want to see your mother's face popping out. You'd be hallucinating. So a grouping can produce above threshold activity with no bottom-up input, but usually attention can't. So if I say prime, I prime you to see a yellow ball, and I'll pay you if you see it quickly. I don't want you to hallucinate seeing the yellow ball until it appears. So how can it be that groupings can activate and attention can only modulate? So we need to ask, how are these opposite properties realized within the same visual cortical circuit? But then the deeper question, why should attention be deployed throughout visual cortex, including areas which previously were thought to be pre-attentive? It wasn't so long ago people thought the earliest stages for attention were in infratemporal cortex, and then it slipped to V4, and then it slipped further and further and further down. Well, why should it be so low in the system? Well, first let me say how we believe attention works, and then let me say why I think attention is so ubiquitous. So how does it come in? Well, we claim that one key pathway is, let's say you're going from D2, you have top-down output from D2 layer 6, and it is going to get to D1 layer 6. One such way is via polysynaptic path through optical dendrites in layer 1 of layer 5 cells, which then activate layer 6. Well, the main thing is 6 goes to 6. Well, what happens in 6? Well, then you have your modulatory on-center off-surround network. So here you have a top-down modulatory on-center off-surround network. Okay, well, if you heard my lecture yesterday, you realize we talked about top-down modulatory on-center off-surround networks in adaptive resonance theory. And when we realized that these circuits were here, it was really greatly exciting to us. And we also realized why it took us so long to see them, because this is folded feedback. The feedback is folded into the feed-forward flow of activation. So this isn't the circuit, and this isn't the circuit. This whole thing is the functional circuit. So the main observation to be made here is grouping and attention share the same modulatory decision circuit. So intracortical groupings are going to be trying to choose the best grouping group with intracortical feedback, and attention can prime that grouping formation process to select the groupings that are most consistent with higher order top-down constraints. And this, I would contend, is one of the reasons why the difference between seeing and thinking has been so hard to understand, because this top-down thinking comes from way up there, from cognitive constraints. And here you have this pre-attentive grouping trying to form way down there. They're intimately sharing the same selection circuit. Well, these simple ideas explain a lot of data, and these are properties even in V1, and they're all properties that are just as important for our needs as they are for image processing. So they're properties that I will be illustrating for you. I won't say them except to say, here are some properties, and now let me show you some data about them. So what about attention? It's in this sort of circuit that the kind of attentional data I showed you yesterday can be simulated. This is simulation with my student Grossberg that appeared in Vision Research 4 years ago, of the fact that if you focus attention on a cue, it can protect the cue from masking by nearby distractors. But let's go to a new property that we didn't discuss yesterday, and that is how can attention select a whole object? So it's very important if you're looking at a cluttered scene in order to be able to pop out a whole object for recognition, and you're not going to always be so careful to be able to just go around and light up that object selectively. Well, what this says, if you can grab part of the object, then you can light up the whole object. And the reason is that by what I just told you, we can understand how attention can flow along curves. So like Rolfsima et al. Had a lovely Nature paper where they recorded in macaque V1 to illustrate how this happens. So first, the monkey looks at a fixation point. Then two curves turn on. And the task of the monkey is to make an eye movement from its fixation point to the end of the curve that's attached to the fixation point, not to go to the end of the distracted curve. And what they showed by recording along the target curve and the distracted curve is basically that attention flowed along this boundary and enhanced that target, and thereby gave that target a competitive advantage as an attentional focus for eye movement control. And so here are the data of Rolfsima. Against time, you plot the activation of the cell, and both the target cells along the target curve and the distracted curve have the same initial activation. But then after about 200 milliseconds, there's a separation of the curves, and the target curve is enhanced relative to the distracted curve, as occurs in the simulation. The idea is that even though attention is directed only to the far end of the curve, it propagates along the entire grouping, and the reason it can do that is because attention and grouping share the same selection circuit. So if I prime this grouping, then it's going to get enhanced, and it's going to run along with favored activation. So you might also ask, which is just as important, remember we talked about the fact that the retina has a blind spot in its veins, and there's all these holes in it. So the question is, how can attention select a whole object when it has missing pixels? And it's known that this happens. For example, Moore et al. Have shown that one end of a bar is Q. The reaction time to a probe at the other end of the bar improves too. But when you block this illusory contour, it doesn't happen. So that this is saying that attention here has been able to flow along the illusory contour, this gap, and enhance the reaction time over there. And this is a little one-dimensional simulation with, again, Rajre-Zada of attention at one end. You have just these little bars, they form an illusory contour, the tension flows along it. And the question is, how is it possible that attention can flow along an illusory contour, but it doesn't just spread across empty space? So how does it get controlled by the illusory contour? Let me emphasize this aspect because it's the subtlety of this whole issue of feed forward versus feed back. So groupings can spread through empty space like illusory contours because they just form into 2, 3. They just spread using bipolar. Attention can spread only if it gets in a layer 2, 3. But attention on its own can only prime layer 2, 3, not activate it, because then we talked about coming up through 6. So attention can boost layer 2, 3 cells that are already activated by the grouping. That's the bottom line. They have to work together. Well, there are other kinds of data that the model also explains. Let me just tell you one more kind. And that has to do with contrast-sensitive grouping, which you recall that his colleagues studied in the CAD in area 17, which is a homolog one. The main point I want to show you this is that it's an illustration of analog coherence. So in this case, you had a target, which is the variable contrast Gabor patch, so low contrast, high contrast. And then you have flankers, and these are constant contrast, collinear Gabor patches, but they're outside the classical receptor field of the cell. And what they showed is that collinear flankers will enhance the response to a near threshold target, but they'll suppress the response to a high contrast target. So it shows how grouping helps to enhance visibility. Okay, well, here are their data. So here we have target contrast as the abscissa, the relative response of the cells. For the target alone, as you increase contrast, the target responds more. For the target with flankers, as you increase contrast, the target generally responds more. But for low contrast, the target alone is suppressed relative to what the flankers hold, and that reverses at high contrast. And here's the simulation with Raj, and again, it's a balance between 6-4 competition and 2-3 cooperation. And the sensitivity of that balance is preserved by the circuit. And also, when you just have flankers, you get no response to it. Well, that's in cats. The question is, what about in humans? And so here in humans, the model also clarifies human psychophysical data. Data due to Shipley and Kelman, and then data due to Enyo and Greg Leshik here at CNS. So first, if you improve the support ratio, so you have more and more contour support to the boundary here, then you're going to get a stronger and stronger boundary. Well, that makes sense as you have more and more inputs going into the bipolar receptor field, they can cooperate more and more. But on the other hand, if you have more and more and more of these things, after a while, the boundary contour strength actually weakens. And the claim is that that's due to the change of the balance between cooperation and competition. So intuitively, the idea is if you just have a few inputs that are sparse, they're all just adding up into this bipolar cooperative receptor field. But as they get denser and denser, the inputs start overlapping more and more in the 6-4 off surrounds. So you have more inputs, but you have more and more competition. So that each input has a smaller effect on the cooperation in layer 2-3, and that's enough to bring you around due to crowding. So we do have our analog coherence, and in fact, if you carry that to a larger scale, then it also helps to explain various Gestalt laws. So one of the Gestalt laws is the law of proximity. Let's say I arrange these inducers in order so that in your brain you can group them horizontally or vertically. And here you have a simulation of that in the model. But now all you have to do is put a few more inducers in here, and it's no longer ambiguous. You only have horizontal groupings as in the model. Well, why is that? Well, as you put in more inducers here, you strengthen the bipolar cooperation in 2-3, that now feeds back from 2, 3 into 6 into 4 into the off surround. This cooperation here makes this boundary stronger than these boundaries. So the competitive balance kills these guys off. It splits away, and you get this little bifurcation. Okay. Well, what happens at higher levels of cortex? Well, one of the beautiful things about neocortex is the same kind of architecture repeats itself over and over, but there are subtle specializations. So the main thing to observe here, though, is that when you go from V1 to V2, you're going to get a larger grouping scale. Okay, so it's in V2 that you have what we would call the formation of illusory contours, a real perceptual grouping. Well, then what is this shorter range thing doing in V1? Well, the claim is that here you're going to have a cooperation between light-oriented cells across the cortical nap. And so you're going to enhance the signal-to-noise ratio here among light-oriented cells. But here you're doing true long-range grouping. Okay, that would be the claim. All right, so now let's get back to this issue of why you have a tension at this very early level of processing. And here, I think the main idea is there's a link between attention and learning. And so we get back to the kind of issues I talked about yesterday. Namely, top-down attention helps to solve the stability plasticity dilemma. But is that dilemma relevant to the visual cortex? Well, sure it is, because multiple thalamic and cortical levels develop through experience-dependent learning. So this is a form of learning too. And if you go into adaptive resonance theory, as we discussed yesterday, you study the stability plasticity business, and you talk about top-down expectations. And I suggested to you that the brain uses a top-down modulatory on-center off-surround network. And today, I've clarified for you where that network actually may be. Namely, it may be top-down from 6 to 6 and back to 4, and how this leads to all sorts of unexpected conclusions, cause looping and attention share the same circuit. And so the claim would be, well, somehow feedback has to be there in order to stabilize the development of the visual cortex. So we're led to ask, how does attention dynamically stabilize development in perceptual learning? And here we realize there's a really subtle issue, because we could get into a terrible infinite regress. Namely, we have to ask, how can a pre-attentive grouping mechanism, so what am I talking about? I'm saying there are these horizontal connections, they're going to be forming, and they're going to be influenced by visual stimuli after eye opening. So that's a perfectly good form of learning. Okay, but these are supposed to be pre-attentive groupings. Okay, so we have to ask, how can these pre-attentive grouping mechanisms develop in a stable way before higher order attentional processes can develop in which to stabilize them? So we're talking about V1 just trying to get its act together. And we're saying we need top-down attention to stabilize it. But how can you get stable top-down attention when V1 hasn't even got its act together, it hasn't even sent V to a stable state? So V1 can't develop without V2, V2 can't develop without V1, you can get into a terrible infinite regress. So that the claim is that you're already looking at a brilliantly simple solution of what I call the attention pre-attention interface problem. Let me say what I mean in words. That laminar, we're back to layers, laminar cortical circuits enable the pre-attentive grouping processes to use some of the same circuits that attentive mechanisms use, even before attention comes into play, in order to stabilize their own development and learning. So let me say in greater detail what I mean, but I want to dramatize this again in another way. You know, we've been talking blithely about grouping versus attention, but perceptual groupings like illusory contours do not need bottom-up inputs to form. You know, when you form an illusory contour, there's no bottom-up contrastive input. That's why we say it's an illusory contour. But that seems to violate the arc matching rule, because wherever you have the illusory contour, the cells are firing in a super-threshold way. And art is giving us theorems that say, if you have cells that fire in a super-threshold way without bottom-up inputs, the whole thing's going to get unstable. So that would mean if that were all that were going on, I could just pick up a big illusory contour and flash it at you people and destabilize your brains. I could go running through the streets of Boston, flashing Denisa squares and, you know, make everyone's brain collapse. You know, I mean, I say this to dramatize you and say something that's so ridiculous. You know you're at a really fundamental question. So the question is, why then aren't the horizontal connections in layer 3 that are used to form these groupings destabilized? They're violating a fundamental stability law. And here, the key insight, I think, is what I like to say. Let me say it in words and I'll show you the picture. That the pre-attentive perceptual grouping is its own attentional prime along all positions of the grouping, as required by the arc matching rule. But you can only do this if you use the layers. Okay, or at least you can do it if you have the layers. So what do I mean when I say the pre-attentive perceptual grouping is its own attentional prime? Remember we said, okay, attention comes in top-down into cortical and goes into this modulatory on-center off-surround network from 6 to 4. And this is the arc matching group. But that's not all that's going on, because when we're forming a grouping within a piece of cortex, when there's contention, that grouping is going from 2-3 to 6 to 4 to select the best grouping. So the claim is before you even have the intercortical feedback, you have the intracortical feedback loop that's trying to select the cells that should be firing for that grouping. So the claim is that during development, when you're trying to grow all these connections, this decision circuit is helping you to select the cells that should be getting connected together pre-attentively before attention ever comes into the act. Well, that raises some really exciting possibilities. It raises the possibility that you don't have to have conscious, volitionally based attention in order to get learning. Because you can have an intracortical resonance that drives learning. In fact, various people have such data. And friends of ours like Aaron Sykes and Taki Watanabe had a Nature paper showing this is possible. Okay, so the pre-attentive grouping is its own conceptual prime. And we do have simulations of that. If you're interested, and I have a paper with my colleagues Jim Williamson and a paper with Aaron Sykes that are both students in the cortex. Well, because of these considerations, this laminar model, which includes arc dynamics, I call a laminar model. And if you think about it, from my point of view, it was really an exciting moment in my life, because these laminar models are a synthesis of arc models, which really were talking about bottom-up and top-down resonance, or horizontal grouping issues. And you know, it just never occurred to me that we would have a unified theory of these things, where now the notion of grouping goes on to be cognitive grouping of higher order information. Okay, but it requires a unification of bottom-up adaptive filtering, horizontal association and grouping, and top-down expectation and attention in this wonderfully compact format. Okay. So that is the first part of my talk.